Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining for this emergency update as the island deals with the persistent ash fall from the last Soufrière volcano over in neighboring St. Vincent. Now, the Minister of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, will speak to the operation of businesses and services over the coming days and what Barbadians can expect. And we're also joined by the Professor Richard Robertson, the Director of the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Centre, who will provide the very latest on the activity at the volcano. And we go first to Minister Abrams.
Hi, Lisa. Good night, Barbados. We're back here again to give you an update as to exactly what is going on with the effects of the volcano on us here in Barbados. First of all, I want us always to remember that as difficult as it has been for us over the last couple of days, it is significantly worse for our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I ask you, please, to bear them in your mind, bear them in your prayers, because while this is a very difficult time for us, it is a life-changing and life-threatening time for those in St. Vincent. So please let us not lose sight of the fact that our brothers and sisters over in St. Vincent still need our help. Over the last couple of days, we've been submerged under some ash in Barbados. And everybody's asking, when will it stop? What is the cause of it? Can we do better? Now, we've been getting some very regular updates from the Met Office, and we've gotten to the point where we can predict the ash effect on Barbados and Barbadians within about 90 minutes of the event. Now, that allows us some degree of planning and some degree of forewarning, but 90 minutes is really and truly just not enough. And we have been trying to get the best advice. This is something that's unfamiliar to us. This is something that we don't have a natural expertise in here in Barbados. We've been taking advice from, in particular, the Seismic Research Centre from the University of the West Indies, and Professor Robertson is on the call with us, and he will be speaking to you shortly. But back to where we are. It has made things very, very difficult for us to plan based on the fact that this is simply an act of God. And even with the best attempts by science, the volcano is doing what the volcano will do. So while we can warn you 90 minutes out that another dust plume is coming or a significant dust plume is coming, we can even get as specific as saying that the dust plume is going to in particular affect St. Lucie or St. James or St. Thomas. We can actually get that specific. The fact is we still only have 90 minutes warning of it, and that does not leave us with a lot of time to plan. So before I get into the do's and don'ts from tomorrow, it'll probably be useful at this point, Lisa, for us to take Professor Robertson, who's one of the foremost authorities in the Caribbean on seismology and on volcanoes, and let him perhaps explain what next week or what tomorrow looks like for us here in Barbados, because we still need some idea of how we're going to plan. So it's probably convenient at this point to take Professor Robertson.
I agree, Minister Abrams. Professor Robertson, if you could go ahead and just tell us about the activity at the volcano. Is this something that we will see over the coming weeks?
Okay, currently, the Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent, located in on a third of the island, is erupting explosively. What that means is that from time to time, and currently it is in one of those periods, you will have explosions from the summit of the volcano, and the explosions result in rocks being fragmented and broken up into smaller pieces and thrown up into the air and pelted up into the air to high altitudes. And once they get to a certain height, they can be taken by the winds in any direction. And it just happens that one of the directions it tends to take it once it gets to a certain height is towards Barbados. The current kind of activity that's going on involves episodic explosions. It's episodes in which explosive activity or venting of ash occurs, interspersed by periods of relative quiet. Now, that kind of pattern has been sustained since it actually started. What has varied is the intensity of the explosions. They have either been stronger or weaker In fact, they were most intense when you had your ash, they were most intense over that period, which meant that they sent up plumes of ash into the air higher than say they're doing now, and therefore the ash got carried to Barbados. Presently, so when I say presently, for the last probably day or so, the columns have not been, well, apart from this morning, the columns have generally during the day has tended to be not very high. They haven't gone very high. So the plumes of ash hasn't gone very high in the atmosphere. And therefore there's a reduced chances of it getting to Barbados. And in fact, the one this afternoon was mainly involving steam and not so much ash. So the question is, what can you look forward to, or probably prefer not to look forward to in the coming weeks? Now, as long as the volcano is erupting explosively, and the Soufrière moved from an effusive state to an explosive state, and it is now in an explosive state. And currently, the time period that will be in this state is unclear. But given past activity patterns at La Soufrière and at other volcanoes like it, this period could vary from a few weeks to a few months to as long as up to a year, given past experience. So in terms of what you'd expect in the coming weeks, it's possible in this week, given that it seems to be trending towards smaller, shorter, less vigorous plumes, that you may not have periods of so much ash. But that is not to say that in the coming weeks, because it's continuing its explosive eruptive activity, that you would not again have periods where you have ash fall. They may or may not be as intense as you had them in the past. Hopefully, for your sake, for all our sakes, this volcano goes back to sleep as quickly as possible. But there's no indication currently that it is heading in that direction. It seems to us that it will continue with this episodic behavior, that we may enter a period of longer quiet, but that at some point it's going to pick up again, and then it's gonna pick up such that you have these very high altitude plumes that could generate ash. So in closing, I'll leave you with the thought, which I know you would not like to hear, but it's a reality, that as long as La Soufrière is erupting, Barbadians have to expect that at some point in time, at some times during the explosive eruptive periods, that you will have ash. And given that I'm telling you that this explosive eruption could go on for days, weeks, or up to a year or more, a little bit more than that, that's what you have to prepare for, that you might from time to time have to deal with that. So you therefore have to have systems in place, and you yourself individually as a group have to have systems in place to respond to when this ash comes. I think it's good for you that you actually have warning of a couple of hours, whatever time you have, that you could then take response to it. You could do measures and take measures that would minimize the impact it has. But the fact is that if you live in Barbados, you live downwind of West Indies, you will have to deal with ash, and it might mean that it might go on for longer than you would like. It's not the end of the world, it's just a fact of life. Just like you have to deal with hurricanes, just like you have to deal with other hazards in the region, volcanic hazard is one of them. Fortunately for us in the region, our volcanoes don't erupt very often, but when they do, we just have to allow them to do what they're doing and respond to it, take measures, and make sure that we can minimize the impact that they have on us.
And if you could just explain for the public, how does this event compare to previous eruptions?
It's still evolving, but at present, the amount of energy and the manner in which this volcano is erupting currently is more than and is bigger than the 79 eruption. It's looking like the scale of the eruption is more untuned to what happened in 1902. So that is why I tell you that it is possible that you could go on for months and probably a year, because in 1902, the explosive component of the eruption went on for up to a year. It didn't mean that you had explosions all the time. You didn't have explosions every day, but you had days in which you had intense activity, while you had other days and sometimes months in which nothing happened. That's what happened in 1902. And this one is looking like it's more like 1902. In 1979, it wasn't that long. In 1979, it only was about 2 months. And during that time, you had a couple of explosions. This one is looking more like 1902. We hope that we are wrong, and that is actually more 1979, so the period is less. But the fact is that you have to bear with, the possibility that it could be as bad as 1902, and therefore prepare for that.
Definitely not the kind of news we want to hear. Minister Abrams, I'm not sure if you want to come in at this point to explain what will happen over the coming days and perhaps weeks.
Yes, Lisa, sorry about that. Today we started our cleanup. Now, let me say again, this is an evolving situation. None of us knows what is going to happen next. So we have to learn to deal with what we have in front of us and how to get by in the immediate future. When we got the news that we were looking at days, perhaps weeks or months, then the government had to make certain decisions. We can't keep the country closed indefinitely, but we also have to balance the need to open the country with being able to secure the safety of our citizens. As things progress, if this continues, we are probably going to get better at dealing with it. But until that happens, then we have to play it by ear, because this is a new situation for us. We have been trying to get external expertise on this, on the cleanup process. We are aware that there's some expertise and some equipment that we don't necessarily have on island right now. And while we're trying to fill that gap as quickly as possible, the reality is that the airspace is closed and the port for now is closed. So today we started the cleanup campaign to try to get Barbados back to some semblance of normalcy and to get people to be able to tidy up around their house to reduce the dangers to them, the health implications for them. So some started clean, some cleaning was able to happen this afternoon, but in many instances, the cleaning had to be abandoned because around midday-ish, we had another serious dust deposit. And then we had some very gusty winds that were kicking up all of the dust, the dry dust that was on the road. So those who would have been on the south and western coast of Barbados, it was awful. Anybody using the highway today would have seen that it was horrible. We are prioritizing, the Ministry of Public Works is prioritizing the cleanup on the major arteries. We need to get our arteries open, and also the secondary roads. We're asking Barbadians to be considerate of each other. One of the major complaints we had today, and one of the reasons why some of the cleanup had to be abandoned, is because people are still driving at the speeds that they're accustomed to driving at, and they're unaware, or they don't seem to care that as you speed along the roads, you are causing the dust to stir up, almost as if it was dropping afresh. So I'm asking Barbadians, first of all, if you do not need to be on the road in the next few days, stay off the road. This is not a directive in the sense that COVID had certain directives. We're asking people to be considerate and exercise some discretion and stay off the roads. We have people out with the public service who are cleaning the roads. They're putting themselves at risk to try to make our life normal. And when you are on the roads, especially when the visibility is poor, you're presenting a risk to the people who are trying to do us a service. So if you do not need to be on the road, please stay off the road. In addition, the police have asked us to impress upon you that the roads are very hazardous. With slight rainfall, the roads become slick, and we had a couple of accidents today that were attributed to the conditions on the road. Now, I shouldn't need to say this, but please be considerate of each other. We've had a number of complaints from persons living in high-rise units who have been trying to clean their own premises and washing down their balconies, and it going down to the person below you. These are the things that we need to be aware of. We also need to be aware of looking out for the vulnerable in our communities. There are some older persons who cannot assist themselves in this regard, and we ask you to be a brother's keeper. The government can only do so much, but if you know your neighbor next door is suffering, please pop next door and help him and her. We also ask in Barbados to please pay attention to their gutters. Well, you may see a lot of the dust that is on the ground, that is in your yard, that you track into the house. A lot of the times we don't apply our mind to the fact that ash is collecting on top of our roofs, and as it becomes wet, it forms a very, very heavy sludge, and a lot of the damage to property in St. Vincent was caused by the ash falling and roofs collapsing. So please be aware that your cleanup endeavors must also involve your roof space. Now, how do we clean? How do we clean? That's the question a lot of people have been asking. I will start by saying that the cleanup efforts today have put an inordinate strain on the supplies of the Barbados Water Authority. The Barbados Water Authority is a closed system, so there's no danger of contamination. We've had no reports of contamination from the ash getting into our water system. But because everybody naturally was trying their best to clean up around their house, and a lot of people were hosing and power washing their houses and washing their cars multiple times a day, it has placed a very serious strain on the Barbados Water Authority and the resources in the reservoirs. The Prime Minister said it best 2 days ago when she said, when cleaning up, try to use muscle and not water. We're asking you please to use as little water as possible. Avoid using water for the cleanup process. If you have to use water, then please use non-potable water. So water that you can't drink. If you have rainwater that you've collected, then please use that before using water from the Barbados Water Authority system. Now, we're taking this one day at a time. And a lot of what we're advising you to do now is, of course, informed by the science, but also influenced by the prevailing conditions at any given time. We are going to make an announcement with respect to the businesses that should or should not open. But equally, while we may be suggesting that a business can open, if we get a heavy ashfall tomorrow, then some common sense has to apply. A business owner should not be insisting that somebody comes into work if the conditions outside are suggestive that nobody should be on the road. A general rule of thumb is that non-essential workers who can work from home should work from home. The other danger that we are facing, and other major concern that the government and the private sector is facing, is that a lot of our office buildings and commercial enterprises are air conditioned. And the best advice is to not run the air conditioning units. The dust will clog the air conditioning units. It will cause the motors to burn out. It also causes issues with air quality inside the building. So the Environmental Protection Agency has asked us please to remind persons that although you can't see the dust, although you can't see it, it is still there and it has implications for your health. So when you're cleaning, we ask you please to wear full protective gear, try to wear long sleeves, cover as much of your skin as possible, because the dust, especially when wet or mixing with sweat, can irritate the skin. And we ask you to double mask. So a lot of the things that we've gotten accustomed to during COVID apply equally here in this situation. If you are dealing with the ash, take particular precautions and please double mask if you can. Remember, we are not as a government trying to force things down your throat. This is for your own benefit. I'm asking you to do this because the medical personnel and the scientists have advised us that this is the best course of action. So we're not going to twist your arm and enforce it, but for your own benefit, you should protect yourself as much as possible if you have to go outside and if you're dealing with the cleanup process. Tomorrow is going to be another cleanup day for Barbados. As we said, we could not complete all of it today because a lot of the efforts had to be aborted. And quite frankly, this is not a one-day thing. We are going to have to clean a lot of the government facilities to try to get as much business open back as possible. We don't want to put people into situations where it's hazardous to their health. So we have to clean to a certain standard before we can invite people back into the building. And this is once again conditional on exactly where it is that you work and whether it's air conditioned or not. So what is going to be open? Tomorrow, shops, village shops, community shops will be allowed to operate. Supermarkets, bakeries, hardware stores, and pharmacies. Closed will be the polyclinics, because we had a situation today. Polyclinics are where people go to get medical assistance. So polyclinics must have a certain minimum standard of health and safety. And if you have a situation where dust is prevalent all through the polyclinics, and that will compromise the ability to give healthcare. So a number of the polyclinics experience significant difficulties today, and we're prioritizing the cleaning of the polyclinics tomorrow. So hopefully the polyclinics can open back up on Wednesday or Thursday. Understand, it's a moving target. All resources are being brought to bear to try to get us as clean and get critical installations cleaned as quickly as possible so that we can provide essential services to Barbadians. But we also have to factor in that we have to be responsible to the persons who have to provide those services as well. There will also tomorrow be reduced transportation services. The port will remain closed, as will the airport. Some persons who are following in my office will realize that the warning went from red to orange with respect to visibility, and the small craft advisory warning as well, I think, was reduced. So while, because of conditions this afternoon, we have increased visibility, the fact is, if you've seen the pictures circulating on social media from the port and from the airport, you will know that there's no possible way that the airport can be open tomorrow. So although the alert, the warning has been reduced to orange, the fact is we still have to get the airport clean to a certain standard as well as the port before we can open back up the traffic. The runway at the airport needs to be cleared. If you stand at one end of the runway, you can't see any markings, anything at all. So the runway needs to be cleared because, of course, safety is critical in the aviation industry. A general rule of thumb is we're looking to open departments that serve the public on Wednesday and all other departments on Thursday. So tomorrow it is essential services, as well as what I listed: shops, supermarkets, bakeries, hardware store, pharmacies. Practically, if you are, let me not say that, shops, supermarkets, bakeries, hardware stores, and pharmacies. On Wednesday, we are trying as best we can to get the sectors of the public service that serve the public open on Wednesday, and all other departments we're aiming to be open on Thursday. There is a caveat. This is subject to conditions at any given time. Remember, we get 90 minutes warning. So while we may have indicated that things should open or things are allowed to open, when we get that warning, we will try to advise you as early as possible as to what it is looking like. So this is what we are aiming at as a government. These are the timelines we're aiming at as a government. We will continue to update you as often as required in order to get the messaging across and allow you to make informed decisions as to how you conduct your business or how you try to get your life back on track. I will end with this. Please remain off the roads unless it is critical for you to be outside. Persons are trying to clear the roads to get us back to some level of safety and transport utility. We need to be aware of them and the danger posed to them by traffic on the road, whether in terms of dust or in the case of reduced visibility in terms of accident and personal damage to persons. So that is as much as I can probably give you for now. I urge you, please, to monitor the official channels. A lot of information is coming at you. Social media this is dominating. Social media, this is dominating a number of the other media sources. I'm going to urge Barbadians, if you want to know what the government's position is, please stick to the official channels. You know what they are: Government Information Services, Prime Minister's Office, CBC, Public Affairs Department, and also our media partners. You know who they are. So please monitor those closely and frequently over the next couple of days, because this is an evolving situation and we may have to make decisions based on changes that happen in a very, very short time frame. Thank you very much. Sorry, Barbadians, please be safe.
Thank you, Minister. I just want to go back to Professor Robertson for a minute. The dome has collapsed, but the ash intensity is still an issue. Could you explain that?
Well, the dome hasn't collapsed. The dome was destroyed. It was destroyed by explosive eruption of the volcano. And essentially what happened is that once you remove that confinement, the dome provided a confinement to gas-rich magma that was below. Once it had built up sufficient pressure to push through the dome, destroy the dome, all that gas-rich magma then continued to destroy the rest of the dome, carve out a hole through which further gas-rich magma is going. And once the magma has a lot of gas in it, it breaks the rock up into finer particles, and these finer particles are the same ash or dust that get into the atmosphere high up and get caught up by winds that bring it to Barbados. Now, as much as it can get rid of that gas in working, in doing the explosion, in doing all this work it's doing, as much as it could use it up, we hope and we think that given how it's behaving, that it's getting rid of some of that. And once it gets to the stage where it has gotten rid of enough of it, it may slow down, for want of a better word, and seal itself for a little while before it then builds up sufficient pressure to go into a period of the kind of activity that you have. So we're going to have periods when it's very intense activity and periods when it's not so much intense.
And based on the activity that you're seeing now, what is your biggest concern at this very moment?
Well, there's so many. I think one of the concerns that we always have is that people have heeded the warning, that they have taken the action that they need. And in the case it's in St. Vincent, the thing that people needed to do was move off the volcano and move to the south. And to a large extent, the people have done that. But there are a few people who have not done that, and therefore they're still in harm's way from the bad effects of the volcano. That's the first thing. The second thing that we'd want, which is another thing of concern, is that people are conscious of the fact that this could go on for a little bit longer than we would like or we expect. And therefore, it means that whether we like it or not, we don't want it to happen, but we have to prepare for the fact that we have to deal with this problem for a little bit longer than we like to. Once we do that, then it's good. We could then get into the more positive aspects that actually the material that is being produced and the work that the volcano is doing, the destructive work that it's doing, is actually going to help the soil, help rejuvenate things, and that it actually would be positive in the end in terms of the countries that it lands on. In fact, both, it's really bad for Barbados now, but eventually it becomes good because it's going to affect your soil. So there's aspects of that. So I get concerned when people think that, this is a one-off thing, this is something that happens, and then we forget about it, and then when it happens, we all surprised. We need to prepare for the fact that it could hit us again. And I'm saying that in Barbados, you're still far away from the volcano. I know it sounds you had a hard time, but the people in St. Vincent are having it much worse. So you're still lucky that you're far enough away that you can actually get the warning. You know that it's coming. You can take precautions, and that's good. And therefore, you should use that. Use the time that you have. Use the resources that you have to prepare and minimize the impact. Stop the ash from getting into everywhere. Get rid of the ash, and you should be good.
Thank you very much, Professor Robertson. And Minister Abrams, I'll give you closing comments.
Thank you very much. I just want to correct one thing. Gas stations are also open as well. The critical services, the essential services will be open. So we know what those essential services are from our COVID directives. So in addition to what I specifically said will be open, the essential services as well are open, and that includes the gas stations. Barbados and Barbadians, it's not an easy time for us. This is a very, very difficult time. This is something that we've never experienced before, definitely not to this extent. But it is also something that we are going to have to get accustomed to as best we can in the short term, because this is going to be around by the best guess for weeks into months. And I'm just asking us, we know what it's like to be our brother's keeper. At this time, please look out for the vulnerable, look out for those who have nobody else. Just keep an eye out for them, because chances are someone who has no family or has no one checking for them has no idea how to deal with this, has no idea as to what we are advising is the best course of action. They may have no idea as to the updates that you are getting. So please look out for those in your communities that you know are isolated and you know can't care for themselves, and keep yourself safe. COVID, if one good thing has come out of COVID, it is that it has brought out the resilience in Barbadians. It has taught us that a mask is not going to kill us. It has produced a level of discipline that I think many of us didn't even realize that we had. So I'm asking us just to bear with us. It's a moving target. The government is trying its best with an unfamiliar situation. We will be as upfront with you with the information as we can. We will continue to try to bring the professionals and the experts in the area who explain to us so that they can explain to you, so you can get a better understanding of what is really going on and have as many of your questions answered as possible. So this is not going to happen in a day. The cleanup will not take a day. It will take a little bit longer than that, but we're making a start. So please be safe. Please look out for others around you. Please take care of your health, and please stay off the road if you don't have to be on the road.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was Minister of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams. We were also joined by Professor Richard Robertson, who is leading the scientific team over in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you, Professor. And this was an emergency update on the La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you for joining. Good night.
Good morning. Good morning, Richie. This is our second conversation. We had one earlier today.
Yes, indeed.
I understand that some people are calling this the Richie and Ralph show. We're with each other every day now. We have to keep our humor amidst all this serious work we are doing. Very glad to have you this morning, Richie.
Thank you.
Dr. Robertson, let's begin with you. We spoke to you just before 2 o'clock or so this morning. And at that time, we were looking at how all the various hazards were combining to produce a totally different situation and dynamics altogether as it relates to what was happening at the La Soufrière volcano. If we can begin at this particular point, what has changed from since then and what has happened?
Right. I think I'll just give a summary in terms of what's happened overnight. The last time we reported was late last evening. And what has happened in the last 12 hours, we've continued to record episodes of tremor. These episodes of tremor normally last about 20 minutes. And there's an interval between them. The interval between them range from about 1.5 hours to about 3 hours. So since last evening, we've had these tremor episodes And in between, there's a period of about hour and a half and to 3 hours. Now, the periods of tremor seems to be associated based on visual observations we have from the observatory. We could see and hear things, as well as satellite imagery, with periods of explosive activity, or enhanced, what we call enhanced venting. You know, it's periods when there are small or different size explosions that push things up into the air, and also periods when you have a lot of ash, enhanced venting, which material going up in the air. And that's been going on for the whole night, more or less. It's continuing now, in fact, as I speak. We are currently into one of those one of those periods in between the venting between the tremor episodes. Now, within recent times, since midnight, we've also begun to record some of these PT earthquakes that we have had before. Now, from what we could see, and from what we have from all reports, the result of all these explosions and all the venting is that you've had a lot of ash dumped in areas occupied in St. Vincent. Certainly in Belmont. There was heavy ashfall throughout the night whenever you have these venting episodes. These tremor episodes, sorry.
That's Belmont. That's Belmont in the west, northwest. Yes.
Belmont close to Rosal, close to Chomaka, which is one of the best places to see the volcano from. In fact, but we've heard that you've had ash really basically all over St. Vincent. And we've spoken about the problems of the ash before, but the amount of ash that has fallen is now being sufficient to cause trees in Belmont to break. The weight of the ash on the natural vegetation is very heavy, and therefore we would not be surprised if the weight of the ash on structures, on buildings, which is in these areas, buildings that are on communities on the volcano itself, that the roofs are going to be really inundated, and probably the roofs are going to fail, and you're going to have a lot of property damage just simply because of the ash fall. That is really unfortunate, but I suspect as you go further south, it's going to be less of an impact, but certainly the environment is